Okay, well, thanks ever so much to all the panelists for their introductions. We've had a few questions that were sent in by some of the chefs in the Scholarly Kitchen and from others. So I'm going to kick off with one of those. And as we said, it is an interactive session. So perhaps we could have a show of hands. How many of you in the audience work for an organization which has either a formal professional development or a formal mentoring program within that organization? That's actually not that many of you. Okay, so I think the first question I'd like to ask the panel and then perhaps throw open to the audience is, do employers need to do more? Or is the objectivity of a membership body like STM or SSP ALPS actually a better route because it's cross-publisher? Who wants to kick that one off? Jane.
Speaking from a university viewpoint, I think sometimes the peer relationships can impact the benefit of the mentorship that's set up in the workplace, whereas an association, it tends to be more informal and more at ease. You know, there's no concern about what I'm going to say being taken against me in an association setting that a university might have. So it's a safer place, as Meredith said.
Something else I wanted to say, I mean, I think it's great to have a formal program within the company. I'm glad that we have that, but at the same time, when I was doing a little bit of research on our programs for this panel, I was a little disappointed at the amount of people who participate every year. So I think even whether it is formally through the company or through an outside association, I do think the employers, we need to be doing more to encourage people to take advantage of what's out there wherever it's available to you, taking advantage of it, because, you know, I would love to see double or even triple the amount of people actually doing it when it's offered.
That's good. You know, I also think there's an intermediary step. So we talk about a formal program, and then you're talking about where that could be, if that's at your organization or if that's at a society. I also think that at an organization, it's really incumbent upon all of us to reach out to people and to kind of maybe collect a few people along the way. It doesn't have to be formal mentorship, but I think we could all do more. Like I sometimes hesitate to look at a company and say, you need to do this, because the only thing I really have control over is what I do.
Nick,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on that as somebody who was actually on the task force?
Yeah, no, yeah, absolutely. This is something I've given a great deal of thought to relatively recently, and I do think it'd be good to have established procedures for mentorship, both at the company level as well as the society level. And what I think that an organization like SSP would be able to offer the companies is probably something a little more key, because no two company is tending to operate on the same basic principles of either just personal development within their specific field or personal development just within the industry and, you know, in general. I mean, you may have a company that is based, you know, sheerly hypothetical here, you know, a company that's based almost exclusively doing some sort of editorial composition work, or a company that's going to be almost exclusively based for, say, online or kind of digital solutions or innovations. Those two companies will have very different mentorship programs in general. So it's important for them to be able to establish, or at least understand, some of the principles of mentorship, as well as kind of cross-disciplinarianism, so that way the individuals who are earlier in their career, or even just kind of working within their career, are able to navigate the kind of broader publishing world. If that makes sense.
Thank you. Any thoughts from the audience at all on that? None. Silence was the stern reply. Yeah, David at the front here.
So I was just...
David, would you mind introducing yourself?
Sorry, apologies. My name's David Smith, and I work for the IET in the UK. So my question, my observation, my thought was, is there something about the the investment that companies make in their people. So where am I going with this question? I'm asking the question about actually, is mentorship something that only happens to people you put in the top right quadrant of any kind of professional development assessment of talent in an organisation? Should companies be doing that? Should companies be looking at other people in those quadrants and thinking about mentorship for people that could be helped to perform better than they are at the moment?
So in other words, should companies only focus on the rising stars or on everybody? Who wants to take that one first?
I could say something. I think that's a great question because actually it speaks to what I was saying earlier about encouraging participation, that I think what we find is that the people who step forward to participate as both mentors and mentees are the people who are already super ambitious and performing well and have kind of all these, desires and ambitions to go far in their career. And it's really the people who maybe aren't in kind of that top tier that maybe aren't coming forward but could really benefit and reach that next level if they were to participate. So I think it's a great point, and it goes hand in hand with sort of trying to get just more participation in general.
I completely agree with Meredith. Back, I was in Wolters Kluwer for about 5 years, and we used to kid around and jokingly, I don't know if you remember this, Bonnie, but we used to call my group the Island of Misfit Toys. And the reason why was because some of them, not all of them, but some of them were these brilliant people that didn't quite get along in the organization the way the organization expected them to get along. And so we spent time, and I spent a lot of time with those people helping to understand their expectations and to revise them and maybe help right-size them and just help them to understand this is the organization you're working in, this is how we work, and you have to figure out if this is going to work for you or not. And so we haven't talked about the content of mentorship, but one really important part of mentorship, I think, is just helping people understand culture and all the soft skills. What motivates this person? What motivates that person? If this is your job and you need to get this done, how are you going to go about doing that successfully? And so, David, I completely think, and I agree with Meredith, that it has to be broader than the people that one day want to be CEO or the head of a department. It has to be the people that, want to be just productive and happy members. And I'll tell you that in one instance, there was one person that I was working with that we decided that really she was never going to really fit in this environment, and that she was brilliant and I loved her, but she wasn't going to fit, and I actually worked out a way to make her redundant and get her a package. And she got a job.
Jean?
In my management experience, I've seen cases where I think the motivation key is the turning point, because at one point, I thought there's no way that these people are wanting to work or wanting to move ahead. And then something just turned, and it was something that motivated them that we finally came to an equal agreement with. And then they went and became rising stars. So I don't think you should give up on anybody. I think if you can understand what motivates them, you can possibly get them to appreciate being mentored and mentor back.
Yeah, no, I would like to echo the sentiments of fellow panelists. I certainly agree that it's not a good idea to give up on anyone particularly, but I also think it'd be good to have some sort of kind of structured understanding of what the mentorship should mean, or what you'd like the employee or individual to get out of the mentorship relationship, in addition to many of the other benefits that come with mentorship. So kind of establishing those things kind of concrete in the employment early on would be really key to someone's engagement with scholarly publishing as well as further development.
So we've got a question over in the corner there. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks. Pippa Smart, editor of Learned Publishing. You asked about whether mentorship should be run within companies or whether there are roles for external organisations, SSP, ALPS or STM. The one point I would make is I think you need to be clear about what the role of a mentor is. If you're working within a small company, the only mentors you've got within that company can help people within that company to do the jobs that that company wants them to do. And as you rightly put out, you've got rising stars that you want to support, but you've also got people who are still valuable to the publishing industry as a whole, although, as Anne said, may not be valuable to that particular company. And in which case, I think there's definitely a role for the external organisations to support the companies in mentorship schemes, because companies don't always have the right skill sets within them. Mentorship is also very personality driven. You've said yourself, Anne, a good friend now was your mentor. And I think also within companies, people can feel quite constrained by the senior management who will be necessarily their mentors. So I think there needs to be a distinct balance between what a company can provide and what an external organisation can provide. And I think that is quite a complicated mix, and I'd welcome any thoughts, particularly from David, from STM's experience, and the rest of you from SSPs. Thank you.
Responding to that, from my own experience, I guess, with clients, I think you're absolutely right, and also as somebody who has built and run a small company, inevitably, when in my such experiences I've had of mentoring or of training or of bringing on new people, whatever you want to call it, it will have been predominantly in the context of how that person was going to benefit the company. So you would hope that that would be mutually beneficial, but you're absolutely right. In a company of 13 or 14 people, that was always going to be the key objective. Having said that, I think we always try to encourage people to broaden their skills, beyond what we ourselves could offer them, whether that was through attendance at events like this, whether it was through participation in networking organisations where, they might take on a role over and above what they were doing for us. So, for example, and again, it's a name that's unfortunately disappeared with the sands, but in the days of the City Information Group in the UK, which was a subdivision of the old Library Association, we encouraged a number of our employees to get involved in that organisation's committee, because they would learn a huge amount from being, with peers who were doing things other than things that we could necessarily be training them on a daily basis. The other thing that I would say was also that maybe this is a function of being in a recruitment company, that obviously you were faced with a situation on a daily basis where your staff had a shop window sat on their desks, because most of them were not recruiters by background. They'd come in there as researchers maybe, or as undergraduates very often initially. So you were always faced with the prospect of training somebody on for their next job. So actually we came to the conclusion that should really be part and parcel of what we did. There was no point in us trying to reckon that everybody would stay with us until retirement. In a company of our size, that was simply not feasible. So, we also tried to ensure that there was, a constructive revolving door for anybody at any stage within the organisation, and that we would try and support them into the next role. It might be with a client, who knows, but that we would do our best to make sure that was a constructive parting. And I'm bound to say that that's actually been very effective. And the Intelligent Resources family, as we like to call ourselves, is still a very big one, and we're all still very close friends, and we all keep in touch, and indeed support each other with, we've ongoing support in terms of people's careers further down the line. Anybody else want to respond?
I would just agree. I would agree with you. So we also are a small company, and so most of the time that we spend is really more along the line of training and encouragement than it is mentoring. We do some things, but this is not for early careers. It would be for people that are on a little bit. So we'll have review meetings where we talk about things and help each other out. But we do have one situation where we hired someone right out of college, and she's amazing, but what we've learned is it takes a village to raise person who just came out of college. And it's not very, very poetic, and it's great. I mean, it's been a couple of years, and she is amazing, and we love her, and we do try to help her with things that aren't just related to what her tasks at hand are, but things that are going to be life skills that are going to help her in general, just managing her time, how to prioritize, how to, separate the wheat from the chaff, kind of a thing. So, but you're right, Pippa. When you're smaller, it's all about sustaining the environment such that it can continue to offer everyone there benefit and challenge.
And two additional comments. At our place, what we do is give everyone a certain amount of funding to attend a meeting or a conference or CE course of their choice. But then we also have a pool of money for training that we feel that they need to have a skill set developed, and they're separate, so that the individual can kind of quantify where they want to go, plus get some guidance from the institution where they should be also heading. And then the other thing, when I was at University of Washington, being the only health sciences library in the state, which is also true at Utah, what we did was partner with UBC Health Sciences Library, and we did a road trip every other year going back and forth, and all of our staff went. And it was a great way to kind of take the benefit of institutional cross-pollination between institutions as well. So not only associations, but you can look at other similar bodies.
Okay, thanks. So another question. I beg your pardon. Sorry, is there another? I beg your pardon.
Blinded by the lights. I suspect you can't see very much from up there. I've been on stage before. I wanted to mention, right now I'm an independent consultant that works primarily with internet standards and identity management, so I hunt the wily mentor wherever I can find them. But before this, I worked in higher education, Stanford University, Duke University, in their IT departments. And what they had going was a really interesting program that combines a little bit of what you've talked about of in-company training, mentorship and leadership training, and getting a third party to come in. Because they basically built consortia of institutions around the US that would have these 3-month programs and build cohorts of up-and-coming managers or longtime managers or anyone they thought was going to be in a leadership position, and bring them through a leadership program and one-on-one mentorship. The thing that was really useful about it is the program that was, the company that was coordinating this, that third party, that's what they did for a living. So they knew the best practice on how to make this happen, on how to instill habits, on the kinds of things that they saw in such a broader gamut than any one institution would do. So that's maybe a model that you could think about, as it's not just about the mentorship, it's also having someone that knows how to be a mentor.
Am I on?
Got a question at the back there, yeah.
Okay. I'm Rich Lampert. I'm a consultant, so like Anne, I mostly see publishing companies these days from outside. And one thing I observe is actually Meredith, one comment of Meredith's struck me, which is that participation in these two interlocking mentorship programs at CELPRESS and Elsevier is fairly low. And I would make the observation that it's probably because it's segmented out as a mentorship program and not necessarily part of the job. Back when I had only black hair and my beard, which was before Word and Excel and email and voicemail, the younger people in publishing companies had to know a lot about what their bosses were doing. They were typing their letters, they were taking their phone messages, they were preparing documents and so forth. And now when emails go directly from point A to point B with no intermediaries, the intermediaries don't learn about this stuff. So my question for those of you who are in largish organizations these days is, how do you break down the cubicle walls, both vertically, if you will, and also across the nice solid silo walls to mentor in the sense of teaching people what your business is?
Thanks. Sorry.
I think that's a question for the audience, too. Who's here's got some ideas about that? That's a larger company.
Does anybody want to respond to that from the audience?
Go on. Sure. Just listening to that, one of the things that strikes me as important is actually the physical environment. Because, you know, most of the silos we see are actually because marketing's on the ground floor and IT's in the basement somewhere where they don't let us see sunlight. But I think one of those things is that getting that cross-transfer of information, the environment that you're actually in, matters a lot. There was a great Harvard Business Review article on what Pixar did to increase serendipity in their organisations, and one of the things they did was to ensure that plenty of people were having to move between the floors to do various things like go and get food and snacks and stuff like that. So I think that that's a big part of this that never gets put into any HR programme.
I'll take that one, Bruce Rosenblum from Manera, or the original question. Whether a large company or a small company, and we're certainly a small company, doing occasional off-site retreats with an outside facilitator, and that's particularly important, can be really helpful. We did our first one about 4 years ago. And I will freely confess that one of the best outcomes of it is it got me out of something I shouldn't have been doing for the 3 years prior to that retreat. But it took getting off-site and having an outside facilitator to do that. One of the other things we've been doing from the mentorship perspective is as we bring on new employees, particularly at critical management levels recently, we've been trying within a month of their joining the company to do an off-site retreat again, a retreat with everyone in the company to help bring them into the company culture and get them to understand better who we are, what we do, what our view is on how we do it. So I think that can help a tremendous amount.
I wanted to just add something to the point about environment. So we have recently moved to a new office space that is open plan, open seating, and I know there are mixed feelings. Some people think it's great, some people hate it, but I think it's worked really well for us for all the reasons that you were just saying, David, about sort of cross-pollination, and to the point about sort of how do you expose your team to what you do, or how do you learn what your boss does. I mean, I'm sort of out there, completely exposed for my team. They see where I am when I go to meetings. They hear the phone calls that I make and receive. They can look and see what's on my screen at any given time. And I actually really enjoy that openness. I just think it has led to more discussion and more questions from them to me about, you know, okay, what was that about? Or even just seeing the way that I relate to other people when they came over to ask me questions and things like that. So I definitely agree about environment being an interesting factor.
Hi, okay, I'm Debbie Sweet. I work with Meredith Night. I agree, I work as our president of Bureau. So another thing we've talked about a lot, I think, is being communication and openness and being available. I think that's really important in our environment, is making sure that people feel we make the effort to be there and ask people questions and talk to them about what they're doing. And it takes time and effort. We're all busy and we have to really consciously think about it, but I think it makes a difference to the types of things that people are discussing here.
Okay, unfortunately, we have run out of time. It's gone 5 o'clock, and we're going to be moving on to the networking session. So thanks ever so much for your participation, everybody, and I'm just going to hand back over to Melanie.